It started with the rock. At least, that's what it looked like to me when I first saw the pictures. Just some dusty chunk of something old, stuck in the dry ground in northern Greece. But that rock turned out to be something way cooler. It was a fossil. A piece of a jaw, with big, strong teeth still in place. And not from a lion, or a bear, or anything you'd expect. Nope. This fossil came from an ape. An ape that scientists didn't even know existed before the late 1970s. His name? Ouranopithecus. Weird name, right? It's Greek literally because that's where they found his remains. Aurano means sky or heaven, and Pithecus just means ape. So, sky ape. Or heavenly ape. But don't let the name fool you. This wasn't some mythical creature floating on clouds. This guy lived on the ground, walked through forests and open plains, and probably had to deal with some pretty rough stuff just to survive. And here's where it gets really interesting. Some scientists think Ouranopithecus might be one of our ancient ancestors. Like, way before Homo sapiens, before Homo erectus, even before Australopithecus, you know, the famous Lucy species. But others, they think he was just another smart ape who eventually disappeared, leaving no descendants. So which is it? A forgotten branch of evolution? Or the missing link we've been looking for? Well, let's start digging. The first big clue came in 1974. A Greek paleontologist named Eleni Panagopoulou was studying fossils near the town of Pykermi, but it wasn't until a few years later that a jawbone with unusually human-like molars caught everyone's attention. Then more fossils showed up in northern Greece, especially in a place called Chalkidiki. That's where a team uncovered the famous male skull of Ouranopithecus macedonensis. Yeah, that's the full name, Ouranopithecus macedonensis. It sounds like something out of a dinosaur book, but he lived much later than the dinosaurs, around 9 to 10 million years ago, during the late Miocene epoch. That's a time when the world was changing fast. The African and Eurasian continents were moving, the climate was shifting, and forests were shrinking. That forced many animals and apes to adapt or die out. Now, this skull wasn't small. It had a heavy brow ridge, that thick bone above the eyes, and super strong jaws. Kind of like a gorilla, but not quite. When scientists looked closer, they noticed the teeth were different. The molars were wide and flat, better for grinding tough food, maybe even roots or hard fruits. And guess what? The spacing and shape of the teeth reminded some researchers of early human ancestors. Not exactly like ours, but closer than you'd expect from a normal ape. So that got people talking. A lot. At the time, most scientists thought the story of human evolution mostly played out in Africa. That's where they found Australopithecus, Paranthropus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and eventually Homo sapiens us. It was a pretty clean story, the cradle of humanity, all neatly located on one continent. But Ouranopithecus didn't fit into that timeline so easily. He was living outside Africa, up in southeastern Europe. And he was living before those early African ancestors appeared. That messed with the whole idea of how we evolved. Could it be that human ancestors started in Europe and moved to Africa later? That would flip the entire origin story upside down. Some paleontologists, like David Begun, a well-known expert on Miocene apes, started thinking seriously about this. Begun looked closely at Ouranopithecus and noticed some cranial features that seemed more similar to hominins, the group that includes us and our extinct human relatives, than to modern great apes. Especially the face. Ouranopithecus had a flat face, not as snout-like as chimps or gorillas. And a large brain case, at least compared to earlier apes. That didn't prove anything for sure, but it was enough to make people wonder, was this guy one of us? But hold up. Let's not jump to conclusions. Because Ouranopithecus also had some features that didn't really line up with human ancestors. Like his massive jaw muscles, which suggested he was chewing some seriously tough stuff more like a gorilla than a human. And his postcranial skeleton, meaning everything besides the head hasn't been found completely, so it's really hard to say exactly how he moved. Did he walk upright sometimes? Was he mostly in the trees? Nobody knows for sure. And that's the frustrating part. The fossil record is kind of like a movie with most of the scenes missing. We have a few frames here and there, a skull, a jaw, some teeth, and we're trying to figure out the whole plot. Still, people have tried. Some scientists place Ouranopithecus within the great ape family, but outside the direct human line. In that case, he might be related to Dryopithecines, a group of European apes that lived around the same time and are thought to be closer to the ancestors of modern African apes, like chimps and gorillas. Others think Ouranopithecus might actually represent a pre-hominin, not quite human, but on the path that would eventually lead there. Here's the twist. If Ouranopithecus is part of our ancestry, that means the earliest members of the human family tree didn't just live in Africa, they might have started in Europe and then migrated south. Think about that. That would mean the out of Africa story we've all learned in school might need an update. Not completely wrong, but maybe just missing a European chapter. And remember, it's not just Ouranopithecus. Around the same time, there were other apes in Europe too. Like Grycopithecus, found in Greece and Bulgaria, and Dryopithecus, found in France and Spain. Some of them share features with early hominins too. It's like there was this whole hidden ape civilization in Europe that we're only now starting to uncover. So what happened to Ouranopithecus? Well, extinction. As the climate got cooler and drier during the late Miocene, the lush forests that these apes depended on started disappearing. Grasslands replaced woodlands. Food got harder to find. Ouranopithecus, along with many other Miocene apes, couldn't adapt fast enough. And just like that, he vanished from the fossil record. Gone. But not forgotten. Because every time we find another piece of jawbone or a chunk of skull in the Greek dirt, the mystery comes alive again. Who was he? Just another ape, or our long-lost grandfather, buried beneath the rocks of Macedonia? I don't have the answer. Not yet. But I've got questions, and that's where all good stories begin. Next time, I'll tell you what it might have been like to see Ouranopithecus in the wild, face to face. What did he eat? How did he live? And most of all, what made him different? Imagine standing in a dry, open woodland in what is now northern Greece, but not today. We're going back in time. 10 million years ago. The air is warm, but not too hot. The ground crunches beneath your feet, a mix of broken twigs, fallen leaves, and patches of dust. The trees are scattered, not thick like jungles. Sunlight shines through their thin canopies, painting stripes on the forest floor. Somewhere nearby, you hear the cry of a bird, one you've never heard before, and the rustling of something big. And then you see him. He's not a monkey. And he's definitely not human. But you can't look away. He's about as tall as a modern chimpanzee when standing up, maybe just over 4 feet. His body is strong, with long arms and thick legs. Not bulky like a gorilla, but not slim either. His fur is dark, maybe brownish or black, covering most of his body except for his face, which is bare-skinned, flat, and wide. His eyes are deep set beneath heavy brow ridges, and his jaw looks powerful like it could crack open something hard. You're staring at Ouranopithecus macedonensis. And he might be staring right back. Of course, we don't have a time machine. But scientists can rebuild ancient environments by studying the fossils, pollen, and even ancient soil from dig sites. And the picture they built around Ouranopithecus is fascinating. He didn't live in a thick jungle, like today's gorillas or chimps. The Miocene world of southern Europe was changing, forests were shrinking, and open woodlands and savanna-like environments were spreading. That would have meant fewer trees to swing in and more time spent on the ground. So, was Ouranopithecus a tree climber, or did he walk upright, like us? That question has been debated for decades. We haven't found a complete skeleton of Ouranopithecus, which is super frustrating, but scientists can make educated guesses by looking at skulls and comparing them to known species. His heavy face and strong jaws suggest a ground-based diet, probably involving tough, gritty foods. That might include nuts, roots, bark, and fibrous plants. His molars are huge and flat, perfect for grinding things most apes wouldn't even try to eat. This tells us two things: he was likely a generalist, someone who could eat a lot of different things, depending on what was around. He probably spent more time on the ground than other apes, especially if trees weren't everywhere. Now here's where it gets really cool. Some scientists believe Ouranopithecus might have stood upright, at least sometimes. Not like us, not for long walks, but maybe when foraging, displaying, or moving short distances. His face structure is flatter and more vertical than modern apes, and that sometimes hints at a more upright posture. Could that mean he was an early experiment in bipedalism, walking on two legs? We don't know for sure. But the idea isn't crazy. Let's talk about what a day in his life might have looked like. In the early morning, before the sun gets too hot, Ouranopithecus probably moves through the open woods with his small social group. Maybe 6 to 10 individuals, a mix of adults and juveniles. He might be the dominant male, keeping an eye on rivals while watching for predators. There could have been big cats back then. Macarotus, an ancient saber-toothed predator, roamed the same regions. Plus, there were huge hyenas and crocodiles in nearby waterways. Staying alert was key. The group forages through bushes and under small trees, breaking open nuts or yanking up tough roots. Maybe the younger apes wrestle or chase each other while the older ones focus on finding food. Ouranopithecus stops to chew, slowly grinding a thick piece of plant matter between those massive molars. Later, during the hottest part of the day, the group rests in the shade, some lounging on branches, others lying in the dry leaves. When the air cools again, they begin moving once more, covering more ground, possibly traveling to water. Communication might have been a mix of calls, gestures, and facial expressions, like modern great apes. We can't know exactly what they sounded like, but can you imagine hearing an early version of a chimp's panthoot or a gorilla's chest beat, echoing through the hills of Miocene Greece? Now here's a thought that might blow your mind. If you looked into Ouranopithecus's eyes, and I mean really looked, you might see something almost familiar. A kind of spark. Not human, not fully, but close enough to give you chills. Because even though millions of years separate us, and we can't be sure if he's our ancestor, there's a chance we share something deep, a common origin, a shared path. The way he watches his group. The way he learns from older apes. The way he protects his young or challenges a rival. It's not just animal instinct. It's social thinking. Awareness. Even a kind of culture. That's the thing people often forget: evolution didn't create humans overnight. It took experiments, lots of them. Different apes, trying out new ways to eat, move, live, and communicate. Some failed. Some vanished. But maybe Ouranopithecus was one of those early experiments that almost made it down the path toward us. Of course, not everyone agrees. Some scientists are super cautious. They say, hey, we don't have enough fossils. We haven't found the limbs. He might have walked like a gorilla. He might not have walked upright at all. Others say, but look at the jaw. The face. The teeth. Something is going on here. It's like a big puzzle with half the pieces missing. And every time someone finds a new fossil in Greece or Bulgaria, the whole picture shifts. Just a few years ago, in 2017, a team announced they'd found Grycopithecus freybergi, another ancient ape from the same region, and they argued it might be even older and more closely related to humans than Ouranopithecus. That brought new energy and even more debate to the field. Suddenly, Greece and the Balkans weren't just places for vacations and olives. They were fossil hot zones. Now imagine the world back then. Europe and Africa were still connected by land bridges. Animals could move between continents more easily. Apes like Ouranopithecus could have migrated from Europe to Africa, or the other way around. So if Ouranopithecus wasn't our direct ancestor, maybe he had cousins who traveled south, ended up in Africa, and evolved into Australopithecus and eventually us. That would make Ouranopithecus part of the family tree, even if not a direct branch. And honestly, that's still amazing. So, to sum up what we do know about Ouranopithecus, he lived around 9 to 10 million years ago in what is now Greece. He had a flat face, large molars, and a robust jaw. His body size was close to modern great apes, maybe around 40 to 70 kilograms, 90 to 150 pounds. He likely lived in open woodland environments. He might have spent more time on the ground than in trees. His diet was tough and fibrous, and he needed strong teeth to process it. His social behavior might have been similar to modern apes. He may have shown early traits that eventually led to human evolution. Or, he might have been a fascinating evolutionary side path. A cousin. A prototype. But either way, he mattered. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into those other European apes, Grycopithecus, Dryopithecus, and more. What do they tell us about this hidden world of European primates? Could Europe, not Africa, be where the first steps toward humanity actually began? Stick around. The mystery's just getting started. If you think humans came from apes, you're not alone. That idea's been around for a long time. But what if I told you it's even more complicated than that? What if I said our earliest relatives, the first creatures to even think about walking upright or living on the ground, didn't just come from Africa, but also from Europe? Yeah. Europe. The place of castles, soccer, and croissants. But millions of years ago, before there were people, or buildings, or countries, Europe was home to giant beasts, strange forests, and ancient apes, a forgotten world that might just be the birthplace of the human journey. And right at the center of that forgotten world stood a family of apes that most people have never heard of, the European Miocene apes. Ouranopithecus was one of them. But he wasn't alone. Let me paint the picture for you. Go back in time again, about 12 to 9 million years ago, during the Miocene epoch. Europe wasn't like it is today. It was warmer, greener, and filled with thick forests and patchy savannas. There were rhinos, prehistoric elephants, saber-toothed cats, and even tiny three-toed horses. But hidden among the trees were something even more exciting: primates that walked, climbed, and maybe even thought in ways no one had before. These weren't monkeys. And they weren't humans. But they were close. Scientists call them the Dryopithecines, a group of apes that lived across Europe from France to Germany to Greece. They're like distant cousins of modern apes, and maybe distant cousins of us too. Let's start with Dryopithecus. The name literally means oak tree ape, because they were first found in places with ancient oak forests. Their fossils have been uncovered in France, Spain, Hungary, and Germany, a wide area. Dryopithecus was a medium to large-sized ape, with long arms made for climbing and swinging through trees. But Dryopithecus didn't look exactly like a chimp or a gorilla. His face was flatter, his brain slightly bigger, and his teeth were closer to early hominins than you'd expect. Some species of Dryopithecus even show signs of enlarged brain areas used for vision, something also seen in humans. It's almost like evolution was testing the waters, trying out different designs. Could this be where intelligence was starting to evolve? Then there's Ouranopithecus, found in Hungary. Another fascinating ape. What makes him special is how he might have moved. Some scientists believe Ouranopithecus had a pelvis and spine that allowed for more upright posture, more so than chimps today. That's a huge deal. Because if you want to understand human evolution, you've got to understand one thing: walking upright changed everything. It freed up our hands. It gave us new ways to interact with the world. It was the first real step toward becoming human. So if Ouranopithecus, a European ape, was doing that millions of years before humans existed, what does that say about where we came from? But wait. There's more. In Bulgaria and Greece, scientists uncovered Grycopithecus freybergi, a mysterious ape that might just be the oldest known hominin. That's right, older than the famous Lucy in Africa, older than Ardipithecus, and older than Australopithecus. Grycopithecus lived around 7.2 million years ago, and guess what? His tooth roots look more like early humans than any known ape. His canines were smaller, and his jaw shape was closer to us than to chimps. Some scientists think Grycopithecus might actually be the earliest member of the human family tree. Let that sink in for a second. That would mean that Europe, not Africa, saw the first steps toward humanity. Now, this idea doesn't sit well with everyone. Many paleontologists still believe, and with good reason, that Africa is the true cradle of humanity. The fossil record in East and South Africa is full of early hominins, clear, solid evidence. But there's a growing group of scientists saying, hey, don't ignore Europe. Just because we found more fossils in Africa doesn't mean that's where everything started. Maybe we're just missing part of the story. And they have a point. There's a scientific rule that says, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Just because we haven't found earlier fossils in Europe doesn't mean they aren't there. Maybe they're just waiting, buried under layers of rock, waiting for someone with a shovel and a sharp eye. So where does Ouranopithecus fit into all this? Right in the middle. He lived a little later than Dryopithecus and Ouranopithecus. Maybe he descended from them. Maybe he was part of a whole new branch. His big teeth, powerful jaw, and flat face show evolution was trying something new again, pushing apes toward more rugged environments, tougher diets, and maybe more ground-based living. And here's what's super interesting: after Ouranopithecus, these European apes vanish from the fossil record. It's like something big changed. Climate? Maybe. Europe started to dry out. The forests shrank even more. The animals that depended on trees, like many of these apes, couldn't survive. One by one, they disappeared. Except, maybe not all of them. Maybe some migrated south, across land bridges, into what is now the Middle East and Africa. Maybe they adapted, changed, and kept evolving. Maybe Ouranopithecus or someone like him made it across and started something new. Let me tell you what some scientists believe. They think the real split between humans and chimps might have started in Europe, with apes like Grycopithecus and Ouranopithecus. Then, over millions of years, some of their descendants moved into Africa, where they evolved into Australopithecus, then Homo habilis, then Homo erectus, and eventually us. It's a European-African connection, not one versus the other. Like two chapters of the same book. Chapter 1, The Experiments in Europe. Chapter 2, The Success Story in Africa. Cool, right? Now, just because this idea is exciting doesn't mean it's the final answer. That's the thing about science, it's always changing with new discoveries. But if you ask me, it's kinda awesome to imagine that the forests of ancient Greece were once filled with our distant relatives, climbing trees, foraging for food, and maybe, just maybe, standing on two legs for the very first time. The quiet hills of modern-day Bulgaria or the rocky outcrops of northern Greece, those places might have been the starting line of a journey that would take millions of years, and end with us launching satellites, writing books, and wondering where it all began. So next time someone says humans evolved in Africa, just nod and say yeah, mostly. Then smile, because you know the story's bigger than that. You know about the hidden world of European apes, and how they might be the lost chapter in the story of us. In the next part, I'll take you on a journey into the mind of scientists. How do they actually figure out if something's human or not, just from a fossil? What tools, tests, and secrets do they use to separate apes from ancestors? It's not as easy as you'd think. But it's definitely worth it. There's something kind of magical about fossils. They're just bones, right? Old bones, stuck in rock. Some are so worn down, they barely look like anything at all. But to the right eyes, the eyes of someone who knows what they're looking for, one chipped molar or broken jaw can unlock secrets that are millions of years old. And in the case of Ouranopithecus, the secrets are still being argued about today. But before we jump into the shouting matches between scientists, and yes, there are shouting matches sometimes, we've got to understand something important. How do scientists actually figure out what these ancient apes were? How can they tell if a fossil belonged to just another monkey, or to a possible ancestor of humans? That's what this part of the story is about. The science, the arguments, the excitement, and the struggle to tell the truth when all you've got is a few broken bones and a whole lot of questions. Let's start with the basics. When paleontologists find a fossil like a jaw, a tooth, or a skull, they don't just guess what it is. They run comparisons. Lots of them. They take measurements. How wide is the jaw? How flat is the face? What shape are the molars? How many roots do the teeth have? What angle does the cheekbone sit at? Every little detail counts. Then they compare those numbers to other species: chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, early humans, and even other ancient apes like Dryopithecus or Grycopithecus. If enough features line up with early human ancestors, the fossil becomes a candidate for being a hominin. That's the technical word for a member of the human lineage. But it's never that simple. Not with Ouranopithecus. Take the famous skull of Ouranopithecus macedonensis found in northern Greece. When it was first studied, scientists noticed something strange. The face was wide and flat, not projecting forward like in chimps or gorillas. The brow ridge was thick, but shaped more like early Homo species than modern apes. The molars were huge, bigger than almost any other Miocene ape. Some researchers got excited. Wait, they said, this might be a pre-hominin, a relative of the earliest humans. One scientist, David Begun, even suggested that Ouranopithecus might belong closer to humans than to chimps or gorillas. That was a big claim. And, as you might guess, not everyone agreed. Here's where things get intense. In science, you'd think it's all facts and logic, right? But the truth is, interpretation matters a lot. One team might say, these teeth are too big. That's an ape trait, not a human one. Another might say, exactly. These teeth show adaptation to new diets. That's what early humans did. One might say, the jaw is shaped like a gorilla's. Another replies, nope, it's more like Australopithecus. And it keeps going, back and forth. Because the fossil doesn't come with a tag saying, hello, I'm your ancestor. Nice to meet you. All we have are clues. But it's not just about shape. Scientists also look at wear patterns on teeth, what kinds of food the animal ate. They study CT scans of jaw structure, the density of bone, and sometimes even chemical traces left behind. For Ouranopithecus, those huge molars and strong jaw muscles suggest a hard, gritty diet like roots, seeds, and dry vegetation. That matches what might be expected in a changing, drying environment. But then comes the twist. Those same traits, large teeth and heavy chewing muscles, are also seen in some robust Australopithecines from Africa. You know, like Paranthropus, the so-called nutcracker man. So, the similarity could mean Ouranopithecus and those African species were related, or it could mean they developed similar traits independently, just by facing the same challenges. It's like seeing two people wearing winter coats. Doesn't mean they're from the same family, maybe they're just both cold. Let's talk about one of the biggest scientific debates Ouranopithecus started. In 2017, a team of researchers led by Jochen Fuss and Madeleine Bohm published a paper about Greikopithecus, another Greek fossil from around 7.2 million years ago. It had root structures in the premolas that looked oddly similar to early hominins. And they said something bold: we believe Greikopithecus and possibly Ouranopithecus represents the earliest known hominin. Boom! Headlines exploded. Did humans originate in Europe? Greece, not Africa, may be the birthplace of humanity. It was exciting and controversial. Critics responded immediately. They said the evidence was too weak. That one jawbone and some teeth weren't enough to rewrite human history. That the features could be misinterpreted, or caused by natural variation, or that the fossils weren't even well preserved enough to draw big conclusions. It got heated. And this is where we step back. Because for someone like me, a kid just trying to learn about ancient history, it's kind of wild to see scientists, the people we think of as calm and logical, get so passionate. But it makes sense. These fossils matter. They're not just rocks. They're pieces of us. The truth is, science is messy. It's slow. It's full of debates, revisions, and dead ends. But that's also what makes it beautiful. Every time a new fossil is pulled from the ground, the story changes. Sometimes a little. Sometimes a lot. And in the case of Ouranopithecus, we're still in the middle of that change. So what do we actually know, for sure? Let's list it out clearly. Ouranopithecus macedonensis lived around 9.6 to 8.7 million years ago. Fossils have been found in northern Greece and possibly parts of Bulgaria. He had a broad face, massive jaws, and large flat molars. His teeth suggest a tough, abrasive diet, possibly linked to a drier, open woodland habitat. He likely spent a lot of time on the ground, but we don't have enough limb bones to say if he walked upright. He shares some traits with early hominins, but also many with other Miocene apes. Scientists are split on whether he's part of the human family tree, a side branch, or an evolutionary dead end. That's where we are right now. And if that sounds confusing, it is. But that's not a bad thing. It means the story isn't over. Somewhere in the dirt of Greece, or Bulgaria, or Turkey, or who knows where, maybe in a cave, maybe buried in rock, there could be the next big clue. A pelvis. A leg bone. A child's skull. Something that could confirm what our Ouranopithecus really was. Until then, he remains a mystery. A maybe ancestor. A sky ape with a flat face and massive teeth. A name in a textbook, but also a real creature who once moved, ate, and lived in a world long gone. In the next part, we're going to try something different. We'll step out of the labs and into the dirt back in time and imagine a scene from Ouranopithecus's life, based on everything scientists believe. What did his world look like? How did he interact with his group? What danger did he face? We're going to bring him to life. Because sometimes, the best way to understand history, is to live it, even just for a moment.